Welcome to this week's episode of Seeking Proof, Finding Grace. I'm your host, Ron Campbell, and this week, as with every week, I want to start off by reminding you of the most important truth of the entire universe. God loves you. Now, this week we are beginning a brand new year, and we had ended last year with spending the month of December looking at the Christmas story. And I'm reminded of one of those pieces of evidence that we looked at as we looked at conspiracy theories and things like that around the Christmas story. You know, the story of the wise men from the book of Matthew. One of the things we talked about in that is we've always kind of taken for granted the Hollywood version of events where there was this bright and shining star right over the manger and it was like a spotlight shining down on the baby Jesus, and all of this happened on the night that he was born, and first the shepherds showed up and then the wise men showed up and everything happened all in one night. And we talked about over those episodes that that was not true and that the storyline doesn't remotely support that narrative. It's just that's the Hollywood version because it makes for a good movie. But one of the things about the wise men who came from the east that we talked about last time was whatever they were following, the star that they were following that appeared that led them to the Messiah. The star that they were following wasn't this spotlight shining down from heaven. And the reason we know that is because it wasn't apparent to Herod. It wasn't apparent to any of the people that he had employed to help him figure out who this new Messiah was, because ultimately Herod wanted to kill the Messiah. Herod was not a great guy, and he killed many of his own children. He killed anybody who he saw as a threat to his kingdom. And we know from Matthew that based on the timing that the wise men gave him for when the star had appeared, that Herod killed all of the male children in and around Bethlehem of 2 years and old and younger. But the wise men followed something that took some effort. And they set out to find something, number one, because they were looking for it. And number two, they had the tenacity to follow it all the way to its destination. We don't know how long it took for them to recognize the sign in the heavens that they ultimately followed and that ultimately led them to the newborn king. We don't know how long that took. Based on the timing they gave to Herod, it could have been as much as 2 years. And the journey would have taken them probably multiple months to make. It wouldn't have taken 2 years, but we don't know how long it took them to discern that this was what they were looking for and what they set out to find. That may have taken a year or more. We just, the timing is unclear and we don't know. But the point of all of this, it struck me as we go into this year, a lot of us come up with New Year's resolutions and things like that, weight loss, and I'm going to try to, quit smoking or quit drinking or quit whatever it might be. I'm going to try to improve on things in the new year. If this is the year that you've decided that I'm going to seek out God, and that is a noble and wonderful thing to start off the year trying to do, don't give up. It took the wise men as much as 2 years to make their journey and to reach the point where they found the new king. We sometimes say, and I think I just made that mistake of saying the newborn king. We don't know how old the baby Jesus was at that point. Most likely he was a toddler, and he was well over a year old and as much as 2 years old. So we don't know how long it took, but they were on a mission and they stuck with that mission. And what I would encourage you is, as you're starting this new year out, if you're truly, genuinely seeking to find God and seeking to answer these questions, which is what we're trying to do on this podcast, stick with it. I would strongly encourage you, read the Bible for yourself. Please don't believe what you hear online. There's so much stuff online that's just not... It's not well sourced. It's not in context. We've talked before about some of the things that are taken out of context. Read the Bible for yourself. Bust open a copy and start at Matthew and just start working your way through the New Testament, and you'll find the pages of Scripture open up to you like you can't imagine if you read it with an open heart. And if you truly seek God out, Scripture tells us, the Bible promises that you'll find Him. It may take some effort. It may take some reading. It may take a little while, but it's worth the journey. I also thought it might be good to recap where we've been in our journey. In all of this month's worth of looking, we started off by building a foundation of who was God, what was His purpose, and building up some foundation to help us on our journey. If you're starting, I hope you'll go back and look at those early episodes. And then we walk through the universe coming into existence and the fine-tuning of the universe. From a philosophical perspective, we would say that's the cosmological argument and the teleological argument. But in looking at those two, we've spent multiple months looking at all the just different rabbit holes and things like that it takes us down, and there's many more I'm sure that we could have also looked at. But what we've come up with is two possibilities. Option number one is that the universe leapt into existence all on its own. Out of nothing came everything. And we found, as we looked at that, there's a lot of opportunities there that people have taken advantage of to maybe change the definition of nothing to not really mean nothing anymore, but to mean, well, something. And we talked about how problematic that was. And what we found in looking at not only the initial event of the universe coming into existence, we also found that connected to that, to get past the problem of universal fine-tuning, that the naturalist has to rely on the reality that the only thing that could have come into existence would be a universe-generating machine that is incredibly fine-tuned, that is capable of producing an infinite number of universes, and just to keep churning out universe after universe after universe in infinity, in an effort to try to get past the mathematical odds that are so overwhelming that we find in the fine-tuning argument that really makes it impossible. But this is where we find naturalism has kind of boxed into this corner. To get the whole thing off the ground, not only does something have to pop into existence from nothing, the most unlikely thing imaginable has to pop into existence from nothing, which would be a finely tuned universe-generating machine of some sort. It pops into existence out of nothing, which defies all logic, reason, scientific knowledge that we have. I mean, you name it, it defies all of them. And I do mean that. I mean, again, we're talking about things here that would absolutely defy the second law of thermodynamics, the law of conservation of matter or energy. I mean, go down the list, and the number of laws of physics or science that we have to take and set aside and say, well, we're going to make exceptions on all of these because whatever it was that leapt into existence has to meet certain criteria. And the only thing that can get past universal fine-tuning, and honestly, it really can't, but I mean, in theory, the only thing that could possibly help keep the door open to keep our journey going is a universe-generating machine capable of generating an infinite number of universes, and sooner or later, if you have an infinite number of universes, you will beat back the impossible odds of fine-tuning to come up with our little universe where life is possible. The odds of that, I would categorize that as impossible. But to keep the journey moving forward, we're gonna allow it, and we're gonna keep the journey moving forward. So that's option number one. Option number two is that an intelligent third party intervened to create the universe that we see around us. Now, this isn't using the God of the Gaps approach. This is recognizing, number one, the fingerprint of intelligence, especially when we get to the whole idea of the fine-tuning of the universe. The fine-tuning of the universe exhibits everything that we would expect from the design of an intelligent being creating something. All of the specifications are so precise and are there that there's just no other way around that. And the idea of appealing to luck, which is the idea of the multiverse, just seems desperately begging for a way out of the problem that the scientific discoveries of the last half century have made in regards to how finely tuned our universe is. So it's not a question of appealing to a God of the gaps. It's recognition, number one, that we see the fingerprint of intelligence, and number two, that only an outside third party could meet all of the criteria to create a universe out of nothing. From a naturalist standpoint, the universe, and everything it contains is all there is. So matter, time, space, energy, all of that came into existence at the moment of the Big Bang. But the problem that you have with that is those things cannot then be an explanation of how everything got here. And that's everything that there is. So when we go back to the beginning and we look at that, an outside entity who is timeless, spaceless, immaterial, incredibly powerful, and personal, who could make the decision and then act on it to create the universe, is a very logical outcome, and honestly is the only outcome that makes sense when faced with the reality that naturalism can't get past. You need something that is timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and incredibly powerful to create the universe that we see around us. And the universe itself cannot be the explanation of its own existence. It just doesn't work, logically, philosophically, or scientifically. Only if we change the definition of nothing can we sneak that in there. So we find ourselves at this point, and remember, looking at the Kalam cosmological argument that we worked through back when we were looking at the creation of the universe. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. We ruled out the possibility that the universe had existed past eternal using Einstein's theories and just the other scientific theories that we talked about in those episodes. Please reference those previous episodes. But in looking at all that, the most likely explanation on the table is the intervention of an outside third party. Now, as we continue to move forward, and the reason I'm bringing all of this up, as we continue to move forward, more and more and more, we're going to see those very same things. And I think it's important to call that out as we're moving forward. What I want to talk about today is the Copernican Principle and how important this is going to be. So if we look at the first two stops along the way, the creation of the universe and the fine-tuning of the universe, the cosmological argument and the teleological argument, both of those would strongly point towards the existence of an outside third party who created everything that we see around us. But the Copernican Principle is something that has driven all of our culture and so much of our movies, growing up in all of this, whether it was Star Trek, Star Wars, Stargate, you name it. This idea of the Copernican Principle is just bound into our popular culture. And I want to quote from a book named The Privileged Planet. I'll put I'll put more details in the show notes. But I want to talk about this to define the Copernican Principle, and I think in a good way for all of us. It says, in its modest form, the Copernican Principle states that we should assume that there is nothing special or exceptional about the time or place of Earth in the cosmos. This assertion has a certain plausibility, since without any other information, it's reasonable to suppose that our location is a random sample of the universe as a whole. What that means in terms for you and I is that if Earth is a representative sample of the rest of the universe, then clearly there are hundreds, if not thousands, and in some cases, according to Richard Dawkins, billions of other planets out there where life has developed and life is quite common. For those Trekkies out there, you have so many planets out there that you have a united federation of planets keeping order and peace through Starfleet throughout this quadrant of the galaxy. For Star Wars fans out there, it's either a galactic empire or an old republic or I guess a first order that is keeping order or raining chaos down on a galaxy far, far away. But for all of us who are science fiction fans out there, this idea that life is common and ordinary permeates our culture. The question is it true? Or are we going to find along the way, again, the fingerprint of design and intelligence, just like what we found in this whole idea of universal fine-tuning, where we saw that this universe is incredibly special, so much so that the odds, it just defies mathematical possibility that it could have happened by accident. What I would propose to you is this. If the option that I talked about before was correct, that we are the product of an intelligent third party, what we should expect to find is that the Copernican Principle is false. That life is very rare, that life that we find here is incredibly special, and that life on our little blue planet is remarkably unique, so much so that we shouldn't expect to find life elsewhere in the universe. And if we do, it would be incredibly rare to say the least, not billions of planets out there. If it's true that we're all just the product of random chance and luck, then the Copernican Principle probably holds true. The reality in all of this is we should expect to find other life and things like that out there. But how do we know whether or not that's true? And I want to go back to another statement from the book, The Privileged Planet, from Drs. Gonzales and Richards. And I love the way they bring this together and pull this quote together. So how would we know whether or not the Copernican Principle is right? Their conclusion was this. What, for instance, would count against the Copernican Principle? If human beings, Earth, or our immediate environment were highly unusual or unique in some important ways, then we would have reason to doubt it. If the cosmos seemed specifically fitted for our existence or the existence of life, then that would count against it. Conversely, evidence that confirmed the mediocrity of our surroundings or the cosmos itself would count in its favor, it being the Copernican Principle. What we're going to see in the episodes coming up is that one after another, we see how special and unique we are. And each step along the way shows not only, it goes so far beyond luck. What it shows is the fingerprint of care and design and intelligence putting together an environment for us. Just a few things that we're going to be looking at along the way. The unlikely formation of galaxies and the early universe after the Big Bang. Our special galaxy and our incredibly ideal location in it, ours being Earth. Our very special sun, our first mover of the solar system, and how our solar system is so very well put together to protect this little blue planet that we find ourselves on. Our very unusual moon and how we got it. That's just getting to Earth. Once we get to Earth, what we're going to find in this planet is not just a planet that happens to luckily be in a Goldilocks spot, in a spot where it's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's just right. The number of things that pile up surrounding our planet and how perfect it is for life defy explanation. At each step along the way, what we're going to see is the fingerprint of love and care and just perfection around us to give us a place where we might thrive and grow into relationship with our Creator. I put all of this out there before we start the journey, I think just as a challenge and as a reminder, as we start this journey and as we're starting this new year, be open. Be open to the possibility that there might just be a Creator out there who loved you so very much that He was willing to do all of this for you. And if we see that in the journey, maybe be willing to meet Him halfway and to go see if you can find Him in a journey that will be more amazing than anything you could possibly imagine. Next week, we are going to start with the Big Bang and what immediately happened after the Big Bang and how that tracks forward to where we are today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope you will stick with us as we go forward. If you like this episode and you'd like to continue with this podcast, it would really help if you'd hit the like and subscribe button, the like episode for this podcast, and the subscribe button for the podcast as a whole. You can find us on our website at prooftograce.com, and you can reach out to us with any questions at prooftograce@yahoo.com. And you can find our podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for joining us, and I cannot wait to continue this journey with you into 2024. Thanks again. Bye-bye.